Okay, so we are going to be whoops. Okay, we'll be continuing now with our study, our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Sixes. And we have here, actually, in this chapter, a number of suttas that I don't want to discourage anybody just to get you to start turning off your computer or turning off the program, but a number of suttas concerned with death and with having a good death. And so it's just this one I just want to go through rather quickly, since this one really has a monastic emphasis. So this is the Venerable Sariputta speaking to the monks, and he's saying about how a monk does not have a good death, and then how he spends his time so that so how a monk spends his time so that he does not have a good death. One is that he delights in work. And what is meant here by work is that in a monastery, it doesn't mean that he's going into town and working as an accountant, a construction worker, a lawyer, but rather means engaging in construction work at the monastery. And this is something of a weakness, I have to say, of many monks, that they always like to be putting up new buildings on the premises of the monastery. And so, then they get involved with architect to design the building, construction workers who are undertaking the work. Often they'll do the work themselves. And so then, when it comes to, you ask them, how is your meditation coming? Oh, no time for meditation, too much involved in the building work. Okay, then another thing is delighting in talk, always chatting and talking, delighting in sleep, sleeping long hours, taking a long afternoon nap, maybe after lunch, hitting the sack at 1 o'clock after lunch, and then sleeping till 3 in the afternoon, and then turning it early for the evening at 8 p.m. and sleeping until 7 a.m. the next morning. Okay, then delighting in company, delighting in bonding. That means like forming intimate relationships. And then this is a little obscure here, delighting in papancha, which is translated proliferation. That is maybe always thinking about things, pondering things, or maybe if a monk is gifted with writing, always writing his personal journal, writing his autobiography at the age of 27, or writing books after book. So just like always engaged in a lot of mental activity, and then not having time to devote to the practice, to the meditation. And so how does a monk pass his time so that he has a good death? So it's just formulated as negatives: not delighting in work, not delighting in talk, not delighting in sleep, in company, in forming intimate relationships, or in proliferation, but rather one is called a monk who delights in nibbana, who has abandoned sakkaya, which is a term for the 5 aggregates, in order to make an end of dukkha, of suffering. I just wanted to go through that sutta a bit quickly, but I wanted to focus on what I find interesting and very valuable for householders, for lay people, and that is the Book of Sixes, Sutta number 16. This sutta concerns a couple who are known by the name of Nakulapita and Nakulamata. The word Nakulapita means Nakula's father, and Nakulamata means Nakula's mother. And so I guess in ancient India, people were often commonly known by the name of their children. Perhaps, probably, it's the eldest son. And so even the Buddha's famous disciple, well, actually, sometimes they're known after the name of their mother, like Sariputta is the son of Sari. Sari was his mother. But this couple are known as the father and mother of Nakula, and in the Pali Canon, just nothing is known about Nakula. So maybe, he just had no connection with Buddhism itself. But they were very devout Buddhist couple. According to the commentary, and sometimes you have to take these commentarial stories with a grain of salt, when they first encountered the Buddha, when the Buddha first came to this town of Sungsu Maragira, and going on alms round, he came to their house. When they saw him, they said, "Welcome, our son. We haven't seen you for such a long time." And then the commentary explains that they said this because the Buddha had been their son. They had been a couple in 500 previous lives. And in those lives, the Buddha had been their son. And so now it was like their son is coming home. But that is a commentarial story. You don't have to believe it. But in any case, they were a very devout couple. And there is a sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Fours. I believe it might be about 54, 55, number 54, number 55, in that area, where they come to the Buddha and they say that we've been very devoted to each other through the entire course of our lives. And we want to know how we can be together in our next life. How can we be assured of being together in our next life? And then the Buddha told them sort of the general instruction for a couple that wants to be together in life after life, that they should have the same faith, observe the same set of precepts, observing sila together, that they should practice generosity together, that they should collaborate in making offerings of gifts and practicing charity, and they should have the same wisdom, the same understanding of the Dhamma, of the Buddha's teachings. Okay, so this sutta takes place on a different occasion, and at this time, the husband, Nakulapita, is ill. He's very gravely ill, to the point where probably his wife thinks he is about to die, maybe so, that gravely ill to that extent. And so Nakula Mata, his wife, is because they're both very well grounded in the Dhamma, so she knows that it's important when death is approaching to have a peaceful death, not to die full of worry, anxiety, and concern. And primarily, she is worried that her husband is going to die full of concern and anxiety for her. So she wants to assure him that if he passes away, she's going to be okay, that she is solidly established in the Dhamma, and so he doesn't have to worry about her. She's solidly established both in, say, the secular aspect or the material aspect of her life and in the spiritual aspect of her life. And so she says to him, "Do not die full of concern." The word is upeka. Upeka is in a way the opposite of upeka. Yeah, so both words are derived from the verb ikati, which means to look. And so upeka has a sense of looking. Actually, literally, it's like looking away, but the sense is, I don't know how to derive it from the prefix and the verb, but it takes on the sense of looking on with worry, with concern, with anxiety. And upeka means looking on with calm and with balance in the mind. Okay, so she says to him that it is painful or suffering to die full of worry, anxiety, concern, and even to die with a mind of anxiety and concern. This has been criticized by the Buddha. And now she's going to give him 6 assurances that will comfort him if he's going to pass away at this time. Though, as we'll see, he doesn't actually pass away. Yeah, the commentary calls this, her statement, a lion's roar. Okay, so first, this is like the concern that arises in relation to the material side of her existence. And we can see how this can apply to us today. So she says to him, you might think that after I'm gone, you might think that after I, the husband, am gone, my wife won't be able to support our children and maintain the household. Apparently, they're not, at this point, they're not all that old since they still have children living at home. But then she says, you shouldn't look at the matter in this way. I'm skilled at weaving and at knitting, and so after you've gone, after you've passed away, I'll still be able to support the children and maintain the household. So for this reason, don't be full of concern. You know, today, say if the husband passes away, of course the wife might be working and have an income, but also she can get, what is this, some kind of pension or security, social security through the husband. If he's had a good job, then she will get some payment through the company or corporation that her husband worked for. Okay, another concern that might relate to the secular side of life is, okay, he might be worried, after I'm gone, my wife will take another husband. Actually, today we should say that this really shouldn't be a matter of great concern, and naturally, maybe, I don't know, I don't have personal experience of married life myself, but maybe if you're passing away and your wife is going to remain behind as a widow, and would the husband be deeply concerned about his wife? Maybe not immediately, but maybe after a couple of years, she's feeling lonely and maybe needs some support at home, taking another husband. But anyway, so Nakula Mata, the wife, was a bit worried that her husband might have that concern, that after her husband is gone, she's going to remarry. And I don't think this was completely frowned upon in India at that time. I think it would have been, maybe it could have been maybe if not a common occurrence, but something that did happen from time to time. But people in India, and even today in traditional cultures, they usually live in large extended families. And so if the husband passes away, the woman will be well looked after, so she doesn't have to take another husband in order to be assured of a livelihood at home. But anyway, she tells her husband, she says that, and this is an interesting point, she says that for the last 16 years, we have led, and this is called, I think it's called in Pali, Gahatakang Brahmacharyang, which is translated here as the lay person's celibate life. So the brahmacharya is the kind of life that is entered upon when one takes monastic ordination. So it is a celibate life not involving sexual activity, but this is the brahmacharya as adopted by lay people. And so this is even, it's not unusual in Buddhist cultures today where there's a couple who are even deeply in love with each other, but after they've passed a number of years living a regular married life and they've had several children, and now both husband and wife want to devote themselves maybe from, maybe their 30s, early 40s on to more devoted religious practice. So they'll make the vow to take the brahmacharya rather than simply kamesu michachara. Kamesu michachara means abstaining from misconduct in regard to sexual pleasures. But they take the vow of brahmacharya to completely abstain from sexual enjoyment. And so here, Nakula, the wife, tells her husband that for the last 16 years, we have led this celibate life. So they, from the previous paragraph, you can see they have several children. Probably the eldest is the one named Nakula. And now, they don't have to beget any more children, so the children can maintain the family lineage. And so now, for the last 16 years, they've been living the brahmacharya, the celibate life. And so for that reason, he doesn't have to be worried that she's now going to give up that celibate life and look for another husband.
Scroll from 1, 2, 1, 3, 3, 6, 6, 1, 6, 7, 4.
Yeah, please, people online, please mute your microphones. I'm getting some voices. Okay, so those two principles take care of, we call the secular or worldly aspect of life. Now we come to the aspects of the spiritual aspects of their life together. So she says to her husband, she says that you might think that after I've passed away, now my wife won't want to go to see the Buddha and to see the Sangha, the monastic community. But you shouldn't think in that way, because after you've passed away, I'll be even keener to go to see the Buddha and to visit the monastery and to see the bhikkhus, the monastics. And so on that ground, don't be full of concern. And I would say that this principle that's laid down here emphasizes the aspect of saddha. So this is a manifestation of faith and devotion, because they both would like to go whenever the Buddha was living near their town. They would always go to see the Buddha, and then they would also come probably after, even if the Buddha is wandering, if there's a community of monks living nearby, they will go to see the monks. And so this is an expression of their faith and devotion. So she says, you don't have to be worried after you pass away. I'm still going to go to see the Buddha and the monastics, even with greater diligence, with greater devotion. So that is the aspect of saddha. Okay, now comes the next aspect, that you might think that after I've passed away, that my wife doesn't fulfill, actually, it's even while alive, you might think that my wife doesn't fulfill the precepts, but don't look at this matter in such a way that I am one of the Buddha's female lay disciples who fulfills the precepts. And then interestingly, for these last three, she makes a kind of, this is what makes it a lion's roar. She says, if anyone has any doubt about this, then they can go to see the Buddha himself, go call on the Buddha and ask him whether that is true. Okay, so this declaration, this emphasizes the aspect of sila, that Nakula Mata is solidly established in the observance of the precepts. And even the Buddha will testify to that if somebody has any doubt. Okay, now, number 5. Okay, that you might think that your wife doesn't obtain what is here called internal serenity of mind. Yeah, so this is emphasizing the aspect of samadhi. We could say that this is the samadhi aspect. Yeah, the expression used here is ceto samatha, but that implies that she attains samadhi. So she's saying to her husband, you might think that I don't obtain samadhi, though actually I don't see why he should think that since they've probably discussed their practice together. But she says that I am one of the Buddha's female lay disciples who obtain internal ceto samatha, serenity of mind. So I obtain samadhi. The degree of samadhi is not indicated here, but it will be some level of samadhi. And then she again gives her another lion's roar. She says, if anybody has any doubt about that, they can go to the Buddha himself and ask him about that. And the Buddha will testify that indeed Nakula Mata achieves internal serenity of mind. So that is the 5th principle of assurance, the 5th assurance. And then the 6th one, she says, you might think that Nakula Mata has not attained a foothold, a firm stand, assurance in this Dhamma and discipline, that she has not crossed over doubt, gotten rid of bewilderment or confusion, attained self-confidence. This is not self-confidence in the way we speak about somebody having self-confidence, but this is really inner assurance that she has realized the truth of the Dhamma, and she's become independent of others in the teaching of the teacher, the master, the Buddha's teaching. So this is that's using sort of rather technical language to indicate that Nakula Mata is at minimum a Sotapanna, a stream enterer, a stream winner. And so she has attained what's called a foothold in the Dhamma and discipline, which means that she's realized the truth of the Dhamma for herself. And so this is all implying the achievement of panya, of wisdom, sufficient wisdom that she has gotten this foothold in the Dhamma so that she's bound for liberation. That's one of the features of the stream enterer, bound for enlightenment, bound for liberation. And so she's crossed over doubt. She's gotten completely free from doubt. Doubt here is one of the three lower fetters, and bewilderment is just a synonym for doubt. And she's attained, as I said, self-confidence. This is not like the self-confidence of a politician who can get up and speak for hours boldly in front of a crowd, or the self-confidence of a movie actor who can play their part without getting nervous. But this is the self-confidence of one who's sure of their standing in the Dhamma. And that's emphasized by this next expression, that she's become independent of others in the teaching of the Buddha. That means that with the attainment of stream entry, one gains the world-transcending Noble Eightfold Path. And so a stream enterer is no longer dependent even on the Buddha, because they have the Noble Eightfold Path. It's built into the fabric of their mind, we could say. So they don't have to, of course, they can go to visit the Buddha, ask questions, listen to the Buddha's discourses in order to accelerate their progress along the way. Since the Buddha might teach them things that they haven't penetrated for themselves, or give them some personal guidance and meditation to help them speed up their progress. But they have the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path are sort of imprinted into the fabric of their mind, the substance of their mind. So whenever they want to, they can just call up that right view and right mindfulness and right samadhi, right concentration, and use that calm and insight to progress further along the path. And particularly with that right view, they've seen into the truth of the Dhamma. They've gained that breakthrough to the truth of the Dhamma. And so all they have to do is to cultivate that right view to the point where it brings the next stages of the breakthrough, once returning, non-returning, up to arhatship, and then they're liberated. Okay, so she says that she has gained that foothold in the Dhamma. And then again, she says, if anybody has any doubt about that, any skepticism, go to the Buddha and ask him, and he'll confirm what I'm saying. Okay, and then the interesting thing is, while she was speaking to her husband in that way, then his illness subsided on the spot, and he completely recovered from that illness. And then later, the Nakula Pita, the husband, leaning on a staff. Apparently, he's still weak from the illness, even though he's recovered. But he goes to the Buddha, and then the Buddha says to him that it is truly your good fortune that your wife, Nakula Mata, has compassion for you in such a way, desires your good, and she instructs you in such a way. And then the Buddha, without being asked, but because the Buddha has that penetrative knowledge, so he knew what the wife had told him, so he confirms it on his own. He says, Nukulamata is one of my female lay disciples who fulfills virtuous behavior. She obtains internal security of mind, and she is one who has attained a foothold, a firm stand in this Dhamma and discipline, crossed over doubt, and she's become independent of others in my teaching, the teaching of the Master. And then he repeats that it is a great good fortune for you that your wife has such compassion for you and that she instructs you in such a way. Okay, so that will take care of this sutta. Yeah, we could take some questions or comments. Yeah, you can just go to use the hand symbol if you want to ask a question. Okay, see Chris Taus. Yeah, just unmute.
Hi, Bhante. Thank you for taking my question. I appreciate it. I guess one quick comment and a question. It's hard. I've been married nearly 20 years. It's hard to envision marriage that's celibate, but that's a comment. But I was there is over a long period of time in a marriage. Sometimes
Wait, speak, maybe speak more loudly or.
okay. There is over a long period of time in a marriage, we start to sort of diverge a little bit. And I was curious what the Buddhist thoughts are about divorce and if that's acceptable or if that is ever really the right thing to do, or is it better to try to, well, I guess it's always better to try to work things out.
Yeah.
But so that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in a way you've answered the question, at least the first part of the question, that it's always better to try to work things out because inevitably there's going to be some differences in views and attitudes and feelings in a long-term relationship like that of marriage. And so, we just have to have sort of patience, understanding, acceptance of differences, and try to, maybe when possible, I guess, to return to and to reinvigorate the original love which inspired the marriage in the first place. But say if the differences become too great and the marriage can't be sustained, there's no prohibition and regulations in Buddhism, no prohibition against divorce and no regulations, that require a married couple to remain in marriage. So if the differences just become, too strong so that the couple can't continue to live happily together, and it won't negatively impact other people, for example, children, then I would say that divorce would be acceptable. Okay, so we could see any other questions. So there's one, Helen Rosen. Yeah, you have to unmute.
Oh, sorry.
Now you got it.
I'm just sort of curious. There's so much emphasis on morality, both in these teachings and in the teachings in general. And I wonder if you have any sense, was morality worse back then than it is now? Or, do people tend to behave more unethically? Or is this just a standard sort of piece that religion plays? I'm just sort of interested in that idea.
Yeah, My suspicion is that morality was, maybe I have a romantically idealized image of of the past, but I would think that morality maybe was stronger in ancient times than it is today. Today, there's just, so much incitement to, maybe to, on one hand, to violence, and on the other hand, to maybe to sexual what is the word? Prolificacy.
Mhm.
But probably just that observing sila or ethical behavior is sort of the foundation of progress along the spiritual path. And certainly it serves as the basis in the framework of the Buddha's path for reaching the stages that lie beyond sila, for developing the mind and meditation, for developing the calmness and concentration, and for developing insight and wisdom.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so probably that's why the Buddha places, well, that would be one reason why the Buddha gives such emphasis to ethical conduct. And also,
Yeah.
quite apart from that particular structure of the path, even looking from the broad perspective of samsara, the cycle of repeated births, where our destiny from one life to the next is determined by our karma, and it's observing the ethical principles of ethical conduct that create the wholesome karma that will lead us to a favorable rebirth.
That's helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we can take Gita.
Thank you, Bhante. This is such an important sutta. Thank you.
Well,
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Bhante, if partners, when you get married, you're very young, 19, 21, 24,
yeah,
and you don't realize who your partner is. But throughout the years, you tolerate a lot of abuse. And then, you don't have the same common goals as you grow older because we change as people.
yeah,
So if one's target is Nibbana and Buddhism and venerating the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and the other one is completely into sensual desires, then we part ways. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because you can still, practice a celibate life and go towards your goals. And that's what I'm thinking, because it's lots of people are selfish. They just want what they want. They don't consider the other person's needs.
yeah, yeah.
The unconditional love, they don't have that. And when we're young, we make foolish mistakes. We don't know, what we're getting ourselves into until you get into the marriage and see all the abuse, that you put up with, and patiently endure. So in these cases, Bhante, is it okay that we travel?
Is it okay that what?
That one travels alone in the path and practice the teachings and awaken to nibbana, because that's our ultimate goal, because our partner is no longer with us. And then if you find a partner in the Dhamma, it's a different story, but
Yeah, I
otherwise,
know. And this is,
right?
I've heard this story so often. People, when they're young, they fall in love and then they get married. And sometimes they come from traditional Buddhist background, but not really a strong grounding in the Dhamma, or sometimes from a non-Buddhist background. And then later in life, one of them sort of connects to the Dharma and really starts taking it seriously and wanting to devote themselves to practice and to study, whereas the other partner just wants to, concerned with leading a happy material life, getting a lot of money, getting nice house, maybe, not necessarily in a very narrow and selfish way, but their minds are just pretty much immersed in the enjoyment of the pleasures of the worldly life, living comfortably, going to sports events, going out for dinner and a dance. And the other partner wants to stay at home and to study Dharma
Yes.
books and do meditation. And that happens, and it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yes, Bhante.
I don't have the background of being a marriage counselor. But if they can live together,
As friends.
pursuing their interest, especially if there are children and they feel some commitment to do that for the sake of the children, then they should do so. But say if the partner who is just wants to lead a worldly life doesn't like his wife being involved with Dhamma and tries to draw her back to the worldly life, or just the connection between them attenuates to the point that there's no bond anymore,
Yes.
then I'd say it's maybe they just have to go their own separate ways, as long as they could do so on amiable terms.
Friendly terms. Yes, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. It was a great sutta. Thank you.
Okay. So next is V.
Yeah, good morning, Bhante.
Morning.
It is regarding this internal serenity of mind, Cetto Samatha. I was just wondering whether you can elaborate just a little bit as compared to your recent talk with Wisdom Publication regarding the state of Nibbana, which is unconditional.
Yeah.
And yeah, could you please elaborate a little bit on this? Cetto Samatha, is it still at the conditional state?
Yeah, the Cetto Samatha, it's the serenity of mind. It really, as I said, it's just another term for samadhi, for concentration. And certainly it's not nibbana, because somebody who is not in any way connected with the Buddha Dharma can attain this Cetto Samatha, this serenity of mind. And it doesn't necessarily entail the presence of wisdom or insight, but the way it's usually framed within the Buddhist teaching, when you see the word Cetto Samatha, serenity of mind, often it's coupled with vipassana, with insight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it can be, I guess, samatha, Cetto Samatha can cover the different stages of the jhanas, the four jhanas, the four arupa or formless meditations, as well as lower degrees of concentration.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. I have no further question. Thank you.
Okay, the next is Namki Choi.
Thank you so much, Bhante. Once I heard from a hospice chaplain that when your loved one is on deathbed, the most important thing, or one of the most important things that you can do, is to give them permission to die.
To give them,
Permission to die.
I see.
And I not sure whether our permission would hasten their death, or but I want to know what's the Buddhist teachings about that. Is that the permission from loved ones?
Yeah, I've never come across a text which speaks about giving permission to die, but maybe you could say, almost without quite using that expression, but that idea is sort of contained within this sutta, in the instructions that Nakula Mata gives to her husband, saying that you don't have to worry about me, that I'm able to take care of myself. That is, in a way, almost the same thing as giving permission to die.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of trying to get, whether it's the same thing. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, I think this idea in hospice, giving the partner permission to die, that's in a way sort of the antidote to the clinging to the partner, saying, oh, please, you can't die, you can't die, you can't leave me behind. Oh, please, stay on. You know, you have to say, well, if the person, if it's clear that they're not going to remain alive, you say, even a thought, you can just think and show in your action, behavior, okay, it's time to go, and just go peacefully.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, next is, I think, Rachel.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is related to the previous one. I'm curious what this sutta is telling us about the deathbed when this couple that has practiced together for so long,
Yeah.
and this woman who even the Buddha will attest to her devotion, that her husband on his deathbed is questioning.
Her husband, what?
Her husband is questioning her devotion. He's concerned he can't die peacefully, and she has to reassure him. Yet the two of them have practiced together, and even the Buddha will attest to her devotion. So what is this teaching us about dying, death and dying, that something like that becomes, what one is thinking when one is dying, when it's obviously not the truth.
In a way, I would say perhaps the sutta is a bit staged, if I could use that expression, in that her husband is also, I believe, known to have been a sotapanna, a stream enterer. And I would find it hard to believe that since they both had this common devotion to the Buddha and to the Dharma, that they didn't discuss their practice together, and that they would have discussed their experiences with Ceto Samatha, with the internal serenity of mind, that they wouldn't have discussed with each other their breakthrough to the attainment of stream entry. So it seems to me that almost certainly that her husband would have known that she had these qualities of sila, solid ethical conduct, good samadhi, and sufficient wisdom to have made the breakthrough. So maybe the sutta, we could say, is formulated not as a historical conversation, but sort of framed as a way to give advice or guidance to others. So if there's a couple and one of the partners is about to pass away, how, I don't know, maybe it doesn't work, that idea. Yeah, I just don't know. Yeah, but anyway, what I think I can say with some confidence is that her husband was also a stream enterer, and it seems to me almost certainly that they would have had some discussions about their experiences, their practice and experiences. Okay, so we'll just move on with the questions. So next is Wiley.
Thank you, Bhante. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay.
Earlier, there was a question about giving permission to die. Can we expand that a little further? What about in terms of ending life support?
Oh, yeah, that would have to bring this into modern conditions, ending life support.
We are living in modern conditions. We got to look at these things.
Yeah. Yeah, my view on this is that, say, if somebody their life is being sustained artificially by machines, and it costs a lot to keep those machines going, and say the patient, there's no chance of them coming back to a full normal life. And so their surviving relatives are faced with a choice. Do we request the hospital to discontinue the systems of life support? Yeah, I would say that that's what should be done.
Something that always comes up in these discussions is someone always brings up that it's considered a very grave offense karmically to injure your parents, and they consider taking life support as injuring the parents.
Yeah, I would.
I've been thinking about that. Yeah, it seems like that attitude is more of prolonging someone else's suffering because you're worried about your own merit. I'm just not sure that's a valid strategy.
Yeah, I'd make a distinction between taking the life of one of one's parents, which is a very serious offense. And in that case, you are actively doing something to cut off the life faculty of the person, the parent. And in this case, you're not actually taking the life of the person, but you are removing artificial means of sustaining life when the patient has no capacity for living what would be a meaningful life. Where they're just going to spend the rest of the time until physical death actually takes place, just lying, say, in a comatose condition, or even, something below a comatose condition.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Bhante.
so I haven't really studied the subject of medical ethics in any detail, but that would be my opinion.
Thank you, Bhante. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's see. People who finish the questions, then you sign off the list so that I'm not. Did I take Rachel? I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'll lower my hand.
Okay. So next is Samantha Jayatilaka.
Thank you, Bhante. I was just wondering. I've heard about the last when you at the moment of death, the last thought moment plays an important role. Has that got any substance? Has Buddha said anything about the last thought moment, how that works?
The last thought moment.
At the on the deathbed. I don't know. Is it anything to do with the rebirth linking consciousness or anything to do with that? Or what has Buddha said anything about the last thought moment?
I think if you look at the canonical texts themselves, the suttas, I don't recall offhand any special stress on that last thought moment. The Buddha's emphasis is more on how one lives one's life during the time when one is, active and fully conscious. But this is sort of based on the Abhidhamma idea that it is the last, what's called the last javana process, the last active thought process that conditions the rebirth consciousness. But generally, in most cases, the last cognitive process is determined by one's habitual conduct and thought process in the course of one's life. So again, the emphasis falls back on how one lives one's life during the time of normal consciousness.
Thank you, Bhante. That's comforting to know.
But there can be, this is my supposition based on maybe some stories that come in the commentaries. Let's say if somebody undergoes like a sudden change of heart towards the end of their life, just before death takes place, that could condition a rebirth in a mode different from that which would be the tendency if that sudden change of mind didn't take place. For example, to use the example both on the dark and the bright side. Okay, so somebody, say, is living a good life, a reasonably good life, then towards the end of their life, but maybe there's been through the course of their life a subtle tendency towards selfishness and miserliness. And then as they start to approach death, then they start clinging tightly to maybe the wealth they've accumulated or their possessions and property. So though they've lived a generally good ethical life, but now as death is approaching, that miserliness comes up and they start grasping and clinging to material possessions or even to their loved ones. And then that becomes an unwholesome process of consciousness that might condition a rebirth in an undesirable realm. Though the good karma of the course of their life, that will eventually come to their assistance and help them in the future. Okay, so that's a change from a good to a bad state. And then on the opposite side, we could have somebody who has led maybe largely a bad life, committing a lot of harm for others. And then as death is approaching, they suddenly realize, wow, I've lived such a miserable life. I really wish I could live my life over again. If I had that opportunity, I would be kind and compassionate and generous. And so they formulate these good thoughts and good sort of mental processes just before death takes place, and that could condition a favorable rebirth, which again doesn't mean that they're going to escape the karma that they've created through their bad deeds. That will eventually catch up with them, but those thought processes towards the end of their life can create a strong, wholesome karma that will lead to a desirable rebirth.
That's great. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, and the last one I see is you're wrong.
Yes, Bhante. I wonder if this sutta is about a demonstration of the power of speaking the truth, satchakirya, rather than demonstration of how a household wife helping the husband pass away. Since the commentary call the wife's words, particularly points 3, 4, 5, as lion's roar, I suspect
Wait, I'm not catching the words.
Lion's roar?
Yeah.
Right. So it seems to be the power of truth rather than, I suspect that the husband already knew what the wife wanted to say. Maybe the first 3 points is a demonstration this is a householder. But if you speak the truth, it has such a power, it actually can cure disease. I remember there's a sutta talking about this particular power, but you really have to speak the truth. Isn't that a demonstration of that?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and also like an important point. I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that this isn't also about how one should relate to a spouse who is on the deathbed, but that's also a point in the sutta that this is I'm just trying to get the opening. Yeah, the point made by the commentary that she roars this lion's roar, and that this is called a satchakirya, a declaration of truth. So it shows that the power of uttering something as a truth can sometimes have a curative impact. And yeah, this is a sort of a common belief in Indian culture and in Buddhist culture, etena satchavaje. Yeah, it's something that we regularly chant when we chant suttas, like say we chant the Metta Sutta, then at the end we go, etena satchavajena, soti te hotu sabada, etena satchavajena, sabba rogo vinasatu, etena satchavajena, hotu te jayamangalang. So that is a satchavacha, it's a declaration of truth, which is supposed to have this kind of healing or beneficial practice. Yeah, so that is true.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that, for calling my attention to that. Okay, I don't see any more questions. And then I had 2 more suttas just that I had in the announcement for today, but we could do them rather quickly. Okay, in Sutta number 19 in the Book of Sixes, so this is a way in which the Buddha sort of teaches or emphasizes the importance of mindfulness of death. So mindfulness of death, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit, culminating in the deathless, with the deathless as its consummation. Then he asks the monks whether they develop mindfulness of death, and then each of a number of monks is going to explain how they develop mindfulness of death. Okay, so one monk says that he thinks, may I live just a night and a day so that I might practice the Buddha's teaching. Then I could accomplish this much. So this monk assumes that he's going to be able to live for a whole night and day. The second monk says, may I live just during the day part of a day and night cycle so that I can practice the Buddha's teaching. So he assumes that he has enough time to live at least from maybe 6 a.m. in the morning to 6 p.m. in the evening. The third monk says, may I live just long enough to eat a single meal. So how long does it take to eat a single meal? Okay, 20, 30 minutes. He assumes he has that much time. The fourth monk says, may I live just long enough to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food in order to practice the Buddha's teaching. So how long does it take to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food? Let's say 5 minutes. So the fifth monk says, may I live just as long as it takes to chew and swallow a single mouthful of food. So we'll give that 1 minute. And the sixth monk says, may I live just the length of time it takes to breathe out or to breathe in. So let me breathe in. So about 10 to 12 seconds. To breathe out, probably a little longer, 12 to 14 seconds. Okay, so then the Buddha says that the first 4 monks, the one who thought about living the day, a night and day, living a full day, eating a full meal, and living long enough to chew and swallow 4 or 5 mouthfuls of food. The Buddha says those monks are living heedlessly. They don't realize how quickly death can take place, and they're practicing mindfulness of death sluggishly for the attainment of liberation. But the other 2 monks, the one who considers that the life might last just for a single mouthful, and the one who thinks that their life might last just for a single breath, those are the monks who are dwelling heedfully. So they are developing mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the defilements. And so then the Buddha ends with the injunction, you should dwell heedfully, develop mindfulness of death keenly for the destruction of the defilements. So that's number 19. And number 20, the Buddha shows another way to reflect on or to practice mindfulness of death. And that is that either early in the morning, this is in the evening, and you also do the same thing in the early morning, you reflect on the different causes of death. And here, these are framed in the way, the kind of causes of death that, especially that a monk might encounter, maybe living out in the forest. So a snake or scorpion or centipede, a snake might bite me, or a scorpion or centipede might sting me and I might die, or I might stumble and fall down. My food might disagree with me. And then the next 3 relate to the 3 humors of Indian medicine. This would be disturbance of bile, phlegm, or the wind elements. So those might become disturbed and I might die. And then, so you reflect how there are many causes of death that we don't foresee. in today's world, we could, reformulate these. Sometimes I don't like to scare people, but we read, especially here in the United States, it's just so terrible that we have so much of this gun violence. Like, you go to a restaurant, or you go just walking down the street, or people go to a dance festival, enjoying themselves, and then the angry gunman comes in because his girlfriend has jilted him, or he lost his job, and he's going to take it out, and nobody has any idea that they're going to die that day, and then he just starts shooting wildly, and that's the end. And then we have so many, traffic accidents. We always drive out, we think, okay, I'm going out into the city, and then I'll come back in the evening. And, we read about traffic accidents in the newspaper, or we see it on the news, but we never think I might be the person. Somebody has been out drinking, and then they come dashing down the road. They don't stop at the red light, and I'm in the car that's crossing with the green light. Yeah, so anyway, so one uses that theme to reflect that, do I have any, so this is one who's really intent on liberation, any bad, unwholesome qualities that have not yet been abandoned, which might become an obstacle for me if I might die tonight or this morning. And then if you see you still have those obstacles, then you put forth diligent effort to overcome those obstacles. And if you don't see you don't have those obstacles, then you can dwell with rapture and happiness, training day and night in wholesome qualities. And then the same thing is to be applied in the evening. Oh, I'm sorry, this is in the morning when the day is coming. Okay, so that deals with, when I teach the 10-point mindfulness meditation on death, sutta number 19 deals with the time of death. Yeah, I have the 3 points. We are uncertain of the time of death. We don't know how much time we have. We have to consider that. And the third point is we don't know what the cause of death will be. That is covered by sutta number 20. And the second point is we don't know the place of death, where we'll be when death takes place. Okay, I've not really much time for questions, but if there's any quick, short question we could take. If not, then I'll just tell you my story about my encounter with centipedes. Did I ever mention that? Not centipedes, the scorpions. Yeah, this was when I was living in Kandy at the forest hermitage in the forest there called Udawatakeli. And it was late afternoon after had been a rain that afternoon. The rain had stopped. And I went out, there was like a walkway, and I went out to do walking meditation. And I was walking sort of peacefully, mindful, right step, left step, right step, left step, right step. Yow! It's like stepping on a live electric wire. So I put my right foot down. It was like stepping on a live electric wire. Then I put my left foot down, and again, it was like stepping on a live electric wire. I didn't know what had happened to me. But then I looked down and I saw a scorpion there. And probably what had happened is that with my right foot, I had stepped on part of the scorpion and it stung me. And then the scorpion jumped over to the left. And so when I put my left foot down, I stepped on the same scorpion again and it stung me again. And that poison of the scorpion, it's I just managed to sort of stumble over to the building and get upstairs, and I think this is about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just lay down in bed, and then I fell asleep, and I slept right through to the next morning. And fortunately, it didn't have any after effect, but there are some scorpions that I'm told that the poison can be actually lethal, but and it's the smaller scorpions, I'm told, are the ones with the lethal poison. The larger ones, the one I stepped on was a larger one. The poison can have a really strong impact on the body, but generally not lethal. Okay, anyway, so that's the story of the scorpion. Okay, so we're going to end now the session for the morning. And this will be the last of the sutta classes for this season. Yeah, next week we won't have a class, 23rd. December 30th, we won't have a class. Then January 6th, through Buddhist Global Relief, my other organization, we have a retreat actually on the evening, Friday evening. It's like a little New Year's blessing ceremony. Myself with Aya Dhammadippa and the two monks in California, Jin Chuan and Jin Wei. And then a retreat. So Friday evening is the blessing ceremony. Saturday is a one-day New Year's retreat. And then following that, the Saturdays following that, then we'll have on the Saturday mornings, we'll have the triple meditation program with 2 sessions of sitting meditation and in between a period of walking meditation. And somewhere in the middle of that, I'll give the meditation sessions. We'll use the themes that lead to the deathless that we came across in Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Fives. So we'll use some of those meditation subjects for the Saturday morning meditation. Okay, so let us end then for the morning. We will do first I'll do the sharing of the merits, and then we'll do the 3 bows to the Buddha. And so we could think of all of the merits from this sort of seasons of Dhamma talks, starting from early April right now to the end of December. And we share the merits with the Dhamma protecting deities and then with all sentient beings. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punya. Excuse me. Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Dukkha pata jani dukkha, baya pata jani baya, soka pata jani soka, hantu sabepi panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Okay, now we'll do the 3 bows. Okay, so thank you all for joining.
Thank
Sadhu,
you,
sadhu, sadhu,
Bhante.
Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. Be well.
Bhante, good to
See you
hear your
guys.
voice.
Take
Good
care,
to see you.
Bhante.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante.
See you next week,
Saranai.
Bhante.
Thank you,
Be safe.
Yeah, I wish everybody a happy holiday season and a happy and safe New Year.
Thank you,
Bhante, thank you.
Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Namo
The
Buddhaya.
same.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Be well. Be safe, Bhante.
Thank you,
Okay,
Bhante.
thank
You,
you.
Bhante.
Have
Take
a happy
care.
New Year, Bhante.
Bye, Bhante. Happy New Year, Bhante. Best of health.
Bhante.
Okay,
Of health
thank you.
and peace of mind. Thank you, Bhante.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bhante.
Okay, so be well, everybody.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Oh, I see. It keeps all. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to end the program.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sadhu Bhante.
Okay.